Following the 100% partisan confirmation vote of Amy Coney Barrett to replace the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg, again, there was only, one Republican that actually ended up voting against that. That was Susan Collins, who was facing a very, very tough re-election campaign. By the way, speaking of the election, it's about a 1 week before the election that these Republicans decided to ram Amy Coney Barrett through. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has figured out what his next plan is. And that's to GTFO back home. Oh, okay, wait. So now this follows, of course, the tiring ordeal of running the Senate hearings on, of course, Amy Coney Barrett, which, by the way, did not happen. Apparently because it's a lot of work. It didn't happen following the appointment of Merrick Garland. That was around, 2016, where President Obama in his last year decided, I'm going to replace Antonin Scalia, and I'm going to appoint Merrick Garland, which a fairly non-controversial choice to replace Scalia, to which Mitch McConnell apparently had other better things to do than to actually, give him confirmation hearings, even hear him out, much less take a vote. Thankfully, he had nothing else that was pressing going on right now, 8 days before the election, to push Amy Coney Barrett. So, pressing business, what kind of pressing business would there be? Oh, that. Right. Well, regardless of what's actually affecting real human beings, Mitch McConnell is returning to Kentucky. Perhaps he is molting or something. I don't know. Might explain what's going on with his hands or why he looked like he was a rotting corpse earlier today. Oh, well, not today, but earlier this month, last week perhaps. But nonetheless, he will be off doing God knows what, probably campaigning, because he is facing an election, even though he's probably going to win very much so by a very large margin against his opponent, Amy McGrath. That said, according to Business Insider, the move shuts down the Senate from doing any legislative business, including reaching a deal on additional coronavirus aid until after voters have cast their ballots. So no aid before the election, no coronavirus stimulus bill. It's almost as if they're holding this up until after people are done voting. Risky move there, Mitch. But of course, Mitch McConnell has blamed the Democrats essentially for there not being a coronavirus relief bill. In fact, here's David Popp, a representative for Mitch McConnell, doing just that, telling Business Insider that there was, quote, nothing to add to what he described as McConnell's extensive remarks on the continued Democrat filibuster on COVID relief in the Senate. There is no filibuster. The Democrats are not filibustering it. Yes, they did decide to not go with the Republican bill. But here's the thing. Can you imagine having the stones of Mitch McConnell? They must be like gigantic, like cantaloupes. To be like, hey, we sat on COVID relief for over 6 months, and, the Democrats passed a bill, and we said, you know what, that's too much help for the American people during this time of crisis, during a worldwide pandemic. And so not only are we going to do a ridiculously pathetic counteroffer, but then when they don't take that ridiculous, pathetic counteroffer, we're then going to blame them. The cojones on this guy. You've got to be kidding me. But there it is. And again, look, the Democrats passed the HEROES Act back in May, and they've had discussions at the White House. First, of course, Donald Trump and his infinite dumbassness. I was like, oh, no, I'm not going to do anything until after the election. And then when it turned out to be a super unpopular position, He then goes, I'm going to negotiate with Nancy Pelosi. And so that's what happened. So the White House was negotiating with the Democrats in the House. And Mitch McConnell said, I don't care what you come up with. Nothing's getting through me. I will stonewall everything. And that's it. That's what's going to happen. Sorry, not sorry. And so that's why you had Democrats that would, first they came with like a over $2.2 trillion bill, right? And then Republicans said, no, that's too much. Okay, we're going to bring it down to 1.8. That's still, I mean, yes, we still want to give more money for the states. We want to help the post office. We want to make sure that Americans get their $600, checks. Because think about this, right? $600 is not a random number. That's basically trying to replace people's lost income from work. That's what unemployment is. And so it kind of evens out to people who have lost their income because they're not able to work as a result of the pandemic. It's enough to keep people from basically going broke, making sure that they can pay their bills, making sure that they can still make their, different payments in the mortgages and being able to get food and pay their bills. Because, of course, we don't have any utility freezes. We don't have any rent or mortgage freezes. And so at least those unemployment benefits were calculated with that $600 figure in mind to make sure that most Americans can be able to afford their bills. Now, the Republicans said, we don't give a damn. What could groceries cost? What, like $10? Come on. No, you should be able to survive on that. And one $1,200 stimulus check for over 6 months. I mean, come on, how much could rent cost? I mean, I don't even know. I have so much money that whatever. Okay, so that's one big problem, of course. You have Congress that's full of people who are just disconnected from the average everyday American. Mitch McConnell, no exception to that. He absolutely is disconnected from the average American. And he doesn't understand how people live. But more importantly, he doesn't give a damn. Doesn't want to understand. Because he sits in his tower of privilege, along with a lot of these other senators, both Republicans and Democrats. But to be fair, at least Democrats are like, I don't know, we'll give them something, right? We're going to go with that $600 figure, and we're going to go and send out checks. Now, Mnuchin, as well as Trump, both also wanted to send out the checks. Of course, that's political ploys. Don't really care. If it helps people, it helps people. Even if it gives Donald Trump a quote-unquote advantage, it doesn't really matter because there are people suffering right now. And so that's what I'm going to do. But anyway, Democrats put out these offers, and they get torpedoed, shot down. For example, as I said, McConnell shut down a stimulus bill of $1.8 trillion, saying that I think it's just a little bit too much. And, we don't want to disincentivize people from working. Well, it's supposed to be Mitch McConnell, but it somehow ended up being Trump. Okay, so that Republican proposal, the counteroffer, was a skinny bill of about $500 billion in aid. And what was that mostly comprised of? Some unemployment benefits, $300, I believe, and then you had the rest is basically corporate welfare into the PPP program, the Paycheck Protection, which is mainly just, again, aid to corporations, which has been shown in studies to have been abused by very large corporations and even defense contractors that in the Pentagon that took a bunch of money to then build airplane parts. Supposed to be for coronavirus aid. Nope. It wasn't for coronavirus aid. They ended up using that to, of course, pad their pockets. Because, of course. That proposal did not include a $1,200 stimulus check, which isn't enough, never was enough, won't be enough, and anything else. So the Democratic bill would have given money to businesses as well, but again, would have extended that $600 weekly unemployment benefit, given money to states, the post office, checks to Americans, help shore up food aid. But again, McConnell killed it because he doesn't care about actual American citizens. He doesn't give a goddamn at all. And that's it. And that's it. Now, as it stands, Americans are doing very, very poorly without this additional aid. I know it's surprising. It turns out that when you don't send people money during the middle of an economic recession and a pandemic, they tend to suffer and not be able to pay their bills. I know. Shocker, right? There was a study that came out recently, and it's more of a no-duh study, but just to show you how you have, for some reason, you have to have studies that come out and show that, like, hey, it turns out 2 plus 2 does equal 4 and water is wet. Why don't Republicans seem to get this? Because, for some reason, for them, 2 plus 2 somehow equals 6, and water is super dry. Republicans and their alternative facts. But the study that was recently released, and I talked about it on yesterday's show, found that a total of 1.3 million Americans were behind on their rent as a result of course, no coronavirus aid. Had the aid continued, had a new aid package that was like the CARES Act been passed by the Congress and signed by the president, which at some points he's been willing to do, well, only 125,000 people would be behind on their rents right now. And so look, 1.3 versus 125,000, you do the math on that. What a disaster. And by the way, those 1.3 million Americans owe a combined back rent of $7 billion. That is a huge hole in the economy that could have went to businesses to help people, small businesses specifically, who have been just crushed by this pandemic. Big business has been doing fantastic, and that's why McConnell and the rest of the Republicans don't give a goddamn about it. All right. And look, I don't think I have to tell you as well that with all that back rent, once those evictions protections run out at the end of the year, it's going to be an absolute disaster. But again, none of this matters to Mitch McConnell because we see his priority. His priority was to rush through his Supreme Court nominee a month after the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. This is the fastest I've ever seen this guy move. Like, I thought turtles were supposed to be slow. This guy, nope, super fast. Immediately replaced her within a month because, and he admitted, by the way, it's been admitted by Republicans that, hey, had we worked on coronavirus relief, we might not have been able to rush through the nomination of Amy Coney Barrett through the courts. And so, through the Senate. And so we're going to prioritize that over COVID relief because we don't care about COVID relief. We don't care about regular human beings. And look, I keep watching these shows, right? And they're like, well, I mean, it's a politically smart decision, and I guess it makes sense in that. Sure, I guess politically, and when it comes to enshrining your own power and all that stuff. But aren't you supposed to be working for regular people? I mean, if anything, this is just another piece of evidence to add onto the mountain of evidence that we have that our representatives don't represent us and never have, never will. As long as we have, of course, this system which is corrupt, which relies on donations from wealthy individuals and corporations. I mean, Congress and the people cannot be more separate than they are now. Millions of people are suffering. The Republican Party's only focus is on ensuring their power just in case they lose to Joe Biden. And again, the bad thing about this, well, there's a lot of bad things about this, but you're going to have an impact, a negative impact on a majority of the American people. Because not only do we have COVID to deal with, that's not going away after the election. No, we also have to deal with now eroding workplace protections as a result of Amy Coney Barrett, rollbacks on LGBTQ plus rights, women's rights, the possible overturning of the ACA, Obamacare, and of course, no relief coming for the American people. Because what happens if Joe Biden wins the election? And Democrats, still retain, maybe they gain the Senate back, maybe they don't. Maybe they don't get enough of an edge in the Senate to overcome Mitch McConnell and his filibuster, or, any other the procedural things that Mitch McConnell would do. You think he's going to let an aid bill pass by without him trying to fight it? I mean, we would have to have an overwhelming advantage in the Senate and keep the House and the presidency to try to push through a COVID bill. I don't think, I mean, whatever direction it happens to go, either Democrats retaking the Senate, but, barely, or Republicans staying in control of the Senate. If Joe Biden wins, we're not going to get a relief bill. Now, if Donald Trump wins, we're also probably not going to get a relief bill. And so the American people will just be made to suffer unless there is a massive stock fall off as a result of this, which is probably the only reason that Mitch McConnell had ever in the first place approved and allowed a COVID bill to pass through. Look, we have entered a dark time in American history. And I fear that electoral politics alone, in fact, I don't just fear, I know that electoral politics alone is not going to solve these problems anymore. We are past electoral politics, and we've really got to figure out a way to hold our politicians accountable through direct action, as well as, of course, electoral politics, because it is important, but we've got to do more. And it really disturbs me that there are people who, celebrities and Twitter blue checks, and this is a longer discussion, I think, on something else, but people who think that, no, with a Biden victory, we can go back to brunch. We can just go back to, not worrying about politics. That's not an option. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and share with your friends. You can subscribe and help out the channel by becoming a patron. It's patreon.com/Jeff Waldorf, or you can become a channel member as well by hitting the join button below.